Hi everyone, and welcome to week 8, our final week of class. This week we're going to continue our discussion on individualized intensive interventions, and this time we'll be focusing specifically on developing behavior support plans. Here are some of our topics for this final discussion this week. Particularly, we're going to focus on identifying the steps of the process of a positive behavior support, describe strategies that might be used to prevent challenging behaviors, identifying some replacement skills that you might use in your classrooms to replace challenging behavior, identifying how to respond in a way that does not maintain or reinforce challenging behaviors, and finally, developing a behavior support plan for a case study child. That's actually our discussion assignment for this week. And as a reminder, all of this content is coming from the top of the pyramid, which is reserved for the very few number of children who still exhibit challenging behavior even when you've already addressed the other levels of the pyramid. So as a review, when we're referring to challenging behavior, what we mean is any repeated behavior or pattern of behavior that interferes with the child's learning or their engagement in pro-social interactions with their friends in the class or other adults. It's also behaviors that are not responsive to your use of developmentally appropriate guidance procedures, and also their prolonged tantrums, physical or verbal aggression, disruptive vocal or motor behaviors like screaming, property destruction, self-injury, non-compliance, withdrawal. Any of these things would be considered persistent and serious challenging behaviors. So let's build on last week and let's review the process of PBS. So the process begins with building a team, conducting a functional assessment, and conducting observations. The functional assessment process leads to a behavior equation and results in a hypothesis statement about challenging behavior. So that brings us through everything that we learned about and practice in week 7. And as a reminder, here's a sample behavior equation from last week. This was for Tim. Remember the components of the behavior equation. There is a trigger or an antecedent. There's the behavior that's exhibited, the maintaining consequences that follow the behavior, and that leads to our ability to make an assessment of the function or the purpose of the behavior. And this was a sample hypothesis statement to follow that equation for Tim. And you can pause and read that if you'd like. So often teachers approach dealing with children's behavior by thinking about the child as inappropriate or naughty. And somehow they need to receive corrective feedback for that inappropriate behavior. Or a teacher might think the child's behavior is due to maybe poor parenting. I do hear that a lot. Or the child's lack of maturity, or maybe learning problems. So in this approach, it's important to extend our thinking beyond traditional approaches and really think about the individual child in your classroom. We refer to getting out of the box as moving from this traditional view of problem behavior coming from within the child and beyond our control to thinking about behavior being related to many different variables, with some of those variables being factors that you can definitely influence. So when we're thinking outside the box, there are many variables to consider about each child. All these different variables that you see here might influence whether a child has challenging behaviors. So many of these different variables can also be changed to support the child in resolving challenging behaviors. Interactions, so there's communication to the child, emotional support or attachment. The health of the child can be a variable. We need to consider trauma, illness, stamina, medication, a child's ability to play, so the toys that are available, the level of play, opportunities for play, choice, and expectations. The learning environment is a really important variable, as we've already discovered. Schedules, room arrangement, materials, adaptations, resources, and predictability are all things that are within our control. Instruction, we own that. So thinking through transitions, cues, prompts, supports, and accommodations. The home and family is definitely an important variable where there are routines, resources, siblings, the environment, respite, predictability, extended family are all different variables that we need to consider. And then what happens when the child goes out of these familiar environments and they go on outings or events? So there are places the family goes and activities that they might engage in, or events with their friends that are outside of the typical environment where they explore shared interests and experiences in those relationships. So in PBS, we look at changing these variables here in an effort to teach the child some new skills and support the development of appropriate social and communicative skills.